Excellent. All right. Well, yeah, no, thank you. And it's great to be talking at Technically Games today about a topic that has pretty much defined my entire career, being mods and user-generated content. As Andrew said in the introduction there, I started this in 2002, actually, so that's showing my age a little bit. But I got into modding and created ModDB because I absolutely love user-generated content mods and everything about it. And I wanted a place where it's really easy to find and just centralize that information for both creators and community and game players. These days, however, I put my time into mod.io. It's a project that we're working on because we want to see modding in more places and in more games. And we want to give developers significant control and ownership of the opportunity in modding. And if I've got one objective through this talk today, it's one to, I guess, tout the benefits of modding, which I think a lot of people know, but to also sort of talk about the future and why I think modding shouldn't be just a feature that game developers sort of add once their game's released, but should actually be a feature that you really should plan for and think about and design your game around, because it's such a powerful tool at your disposal that you can use to really, I guess, mobilize and strengthen your game's community sales and longevity. But first, a little bit of a primer. So modding, as I'm sure probably everyone here knows, is really any content created by players for games. And it can be incredibly simple, it can be incredibly complex, it can be made for any number of reasons. And it's basically been around pretty much since gaming really started, right back from sort of the arcade days. But I guess what everyone here today knows, and I certainly got my start playing content for the first-person shooter games of the 90s when engines and tools started opening up and people had an opportunity to, I guess, start to dabble in them and explore and experiment. And because engines didn't exist, that like Unity and Unreal that we kind of take for granted today, modding was a great way to sort of get into the game development industry. And as for me, well, I sort of picked out one anecdote here, like one early memory that really got me into it. But Counter-Strike, like it was such a defining mod, and I think there's probably a lot of people in the same bucket. But I threw up a rather obscure one, War in Europe, here, because I've got really fond memories. It's basically an early version of gun game where the more kills you got, the more your weapons upgraded. So it was horribly unbalanced, and I remember playing it with my friends at the time. But we had so much fun just trying to race each other to it, and it led to some really awesome emergent sort of gameplay, and really it just blew me away, like what modders were doing and what they were experimenting with and trying. Because at the time, I think back in 2002 and 98 and that, when I was playing these games and content, like first-person shooters and deathmatch was sort of the mode, and then Counter-Strike added sort of squads, loadouts, purchasing, objectives, and it completely, like, so many radical ideas that they merged into one, and it just works so well. And that's really was the eye-opening moment for me. But I'm certainly not alone, though, in, I guess, like being in awe of modding and what it's done for the games industry. And despite the fact that it's had such an insane run and has played such a big role, I think, in defining many genres, many games that are pretty much the biggest titles in the industry today, I still feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what it's going to do. We very much live in an incredibly competitive landscape for game development, where it's all about top charts, engagement, and live services, and all these types of mechanisms that are quite challenging for game developers and studios to navigate. And I think modding's got a really strong history of sort of helping you rise above that and really stand out and give your game legs for the journey. And that's really where I'm going to talk about and touch on for the rest of this presentation today. So the first sort of topic that I wanted to address is that modding is expanding. And I believe very much so that game developers, like once upon a time, it was certainly the domain of the big AAA PC games. And that was because you needed a large community of players such that you'd have a large enough community of creators. Modding wasn't that accessible. You had to go to websites to download content. That it really meant that only the largest games could have the big enough player base to sustain that kind of, difficulty in accessing mods and content. But these days, really, games of all shapes and sizes, it's never been easier. Like to give a good example, at mod.io, for example, we're very big on building out tools and technology that makes it super easy for game developers to integrate mod support and to show what what we've done. For example, here's the tabs overlay for in-game in Unity. So tabs Totally Accurate Battle Simulator is a Unity game, and they're using our Unity plugin to sort of power their modding community and integration. So it comes fully featured with the UI and all the tools you need. And where I suppose modding probably used to be quite a complicated feature to support, the engines are getting better. They're trying to figure out how to make it easier. There's tools and plugins like what I'm showing here. And we've even had a game developer integrate mod support into their title during a game jam. So they managed to do that in the weekend, showing just how accessible and how far we've come. That the games of all shapes and sizes can do it. They can make it immediately available for their players, and their players can then start sharing and consuming content. Another example of how modding is changing and like what I just touched on is that traditionally it's been the domain of PC games, but it's certainly expanding. And I mean, this was probably the primary reason why we started working on our newer project, Mod.io, in that we wanted to see mods on consoles and mobile devices, because really with each generation, they basically become more PC-like anyway. And I think there's a really strong misconception that because mods are generally created on PC, because you kind of need the dexterity of a mouse and a keyboard to be able to do complicated content creation, it doesn't really work on console and mobile. But if there's one thing I've learned over 18 years of working with modding communities, it's that you should never ever underestimate the dedication and the talent of your player base and what they're capable of. And probably the best example there's like Grand Theft Auto. They don't even have any official mod support or tools, and they certainly provide no assistance to their community. Their community has made role play servers and all manner of content and mods, and it's highly active, and I'd say probably a very unexpected valuable part of that gaming ecosystem. So never underestimate your creators, and always attempt to really expand your horizons. If you're building a mobile game, if you really want to stand out and be unique, I think user-generated content would be an incredibly differentiating feature. And even if that content creation might happen on PC and then be brought into the mobile world, your creators will get there and they'll do that and they'll figure that out. Quite often, you only have to give them a little bit to get started. And that's why this screenshot's here. You're probably wondering why I've got this picture of a high-end racing rig. What you see in the middle there is, it's not even really a game. It's made by an Aussie developer. It's called Dash Panel, and people can design custom dashes for any car really. So Formula One cars or racing cars, whatever it might be, just everyday cars. And what they do is they design and share these via iOS, Android, and on Steam. And people with high-end racing rigs will then download these custom dashes. They'll plug it into Forza or the game that they're playing. And then when they're driving that game, they've got a speedometer and a tachometer and all of the sort of dials that the actual car that they're driving in-game would have in real life in front of them on their mobile device. So this is a title that's doing user-generated content and modding on mobile, on Steam, and doing it in a really unique and different way. So really, I think level up and really think about the different places that UGC can go into and what that can mean for your game, and the sort of opportunities and different paths that you can explore, because let's move beyond just PC and explore different avenues like this. And I suppose in terms of the level of complexity and how you want modding to work for your game, quite often game studios will be like, well, to the earlier point, well, do we have to create editors and 3D tools and things that people can use to share and submit content? Reality is, again, you don't have to. Honestly, the best thing you can probably do is give modders a few example mods, a few little sample projects that they can learn from, maybe throw a guide or a video alongside that. And quite often that's all your creators will need to be able to adapt and work off that. But obviously, the more and more you can do, I'd say, the better you'll get. The more you'll get from your modding community, and City Skylines is probably one of my favorite examples. Paradox Interactive and all the studios and developers that they work with are very pro modding in every asset of and every facet of what they do. And where I think SimCity probably once defined this genre and is such a a big game, I'd say City Skylines now almost defines this genre, as they've just increasingly added more and more content and tools for their creators, and made everything moddable, such that they've got an extraordinarily large 250,000 pieces of content made, and shared on their Steam workshop, that really allows you as the player to change and personalize your city in any way you really want. And I think as a result of that, now they've got this franchise that is a world beater and defines this. And they're taking on the biggest games in the world through doing that, and it's going to hold them in good stead for the future. In terms of some of the areas that I think is really important once you do have modding in your title. So you've gone through the early processes of been like, well, what do I want modding to be? Like, what do I want people to change? Is it just cosmetics? Is it gameplay? Or is it everything in between? Once you've kind of made those decisions and you do have modding in your title, I think it's really important to work with your community and leverage and reward your creators in unique and different ways to really make modding, I guess, hum for your title and for its success. And that comes down to metrics and sort of analyzing trends. Certainly at Mod.io, one of the things that we're really obsessed with and we really want to do over time is we want to attach as much metrics to modding as we can. We want to obviously prove to game developers the sort of engagement and the impact that modding is having on their player number and their retention and all of that, and give them great metrics. But we also want to show what's trending. Your creators are going to make far more content and try far more creative and different things than you ever can, because they outnumber you 10 to 1. So knowing what types of mods and how much they've been downloaded and what that means for your studio is something is really important. And the more you can get out of the platform that you're using to sort of help you understand that, the better. And then once you have that information, start using it. So Descenders, for example, is a great title that does this. And Mike Rose has been Mike Rose, who's the publisher at No More Robots, has sort of talked about it a little bit. What they did is they added modding to their PC version of their game, and they've talked numerous times on how it has massively contributed to their game's success. And I obviously there's a quote here that their game's now been out for 3 years, I think, and it's selling more this year than it did in year one. And that sort of bucks all the trends that you'd traditionally think about for game sales. And modding has been a key part of that. Identifying the best mods, working with those creators to make them an official part of the game has worked really, really well for them. And another great example at the other end of the spectrum is of course Left 4 Dead 2. So this one's quite recent, but Left 4 Dead's a game that has been out now for it might almost be 10 years, not quite actually, but it hasn't had an official update in 7 years. And what they recently dropped in September was a creator DLC. So The Last Stand was entirely made by their community, and they released that as for free on Steam as an official update to the game. And this really blows my mind that a title that hasn't had an update in 7 years can drop a community created piece of content and hit 100,000 players and see a $500,000 500% jump in player numbers as a result. That's quite incredible numbers and metrics that was powered by their community and just by listening to what their players wanted and giving them an avenue to sort of put that out there, sort of drove and led to this. So quite an incredible thing. And certainly a success that we've seen a lot of game studios replicate and do, like The Binding of Isaac and Insurgency, a game that I'm about to talk about as well. They're really good at working with the community, listening to what they want, working with them to make it a part of the game, and generally creating amazing outcomes for both the creator and themselves and their players. Their players get more of what they want. They as a studio get more sales and success, and quite often their creators get rewarded and they modded the game because they love it and they wanted the recognition and the knowledge, and they gain that through that process. So speaking of Insurgency Sandstorm, So the Insurgency is a team that I've had the pleasure of working with for a long time now. So New World Interactive, the creators of the Insurgency games and brands, and originally, like, I would say if you had to pick like a really hard genre to compete in, you'd probably say, all right, first person shooters, because they're made by massive AAA teams with huge budgets. So like, and they've got huge content production teams that are literally like their job is to churn out new content, daily skins, emotes, season passes, and just all kinds of systems to really engage their players that quite often like have 200 people plus production teams behind that. And so for Insurgency and certain games like this to carve out a really valuable, incredibly strong niche, like they've done that largely because they're incredible at sort of mobilizing and working with their player creator community and recognizing that the reluctance of the big companies and the uncertainty and the lack of knowledge they have around user-generated content is actually an opportunity for them to do the opposite and to really embrace and work with their players and their creators. And I think their sort of history sort of speaks for itself when you look at where they've come from and where they've gotten to today. So they, in 2007, launched an incredible mod for Half-Life 2 to critical acclaim. And off that success, they started working on Insurgency as a standalone game. And I think it's got 80,000 reviews on Steam at 91% positive. So to absolute critical acclaim, they defied the odds and managed to make a first-person shooter as an indie team and studio. And now they've, in 2018, their most recent title, Insurgency Sandstorm, has got millions of players. They've got multiple studios. They've got a huge team. They were recently acquired by Saber Interactive and the Embracer Group. So like to have come so far, I think just by having that singular mindset and focus on user-generated content is their edge and their competitive difference, and something that they can do that others can't. I think for them, massively leveled the playing field and sort of gave them an opportunity to do a huge amount more than they would otherwise normally have been able to if they were just the small mod team that created everything themselves. So it's a fantastic story, and certainly one that I think is repeatable, and we could all learn a lot and be inspired by. Looking towards, I guess, the future and what modding can become and what it represents to the games industry, I thought I'd throw up Roblox here. They actually just filed their IPO yesterday, and they're looking at raising billions and billions of dollars. That's quite unfathomable, really, considering that as a studio they make no content in-house. They don't have a single content production team. It's entirely done by their audience, and I think it's very much a misunderstood game amongst developers in the industry, because it's aimed at kids. And it was originally out 16 years ago, and it looks like a game that was sort of came out 16 years ago. So I think the combination of those factors, and it's very much misunderstood as to how they've done it and how it works, and what can we learn from it, and can we repeat and sort of see some of their success. And for us, we very strongly believe that it's definitely not an isolated story. I think the sandbox genre is incredibly hard, but what we see in the future is we see games that basically become specialists in their domain. So you create this incredible first-person shooter or this incredible RPG or MOBA, and then you've got this incredible core gameplay loop, and then you do what Roblox has done, and you layer on really good user-generated content, creation tools, give your players the sort of access that Roblox does. And I'm pretty sure we'll see sort of these specialist games and verticals pop up that serve this this desire and want for people to to be able to tap into a huge audience like Roblox creators can in different areas. And in terms of, just to give a bit of context as to how Roblox works, and how they've sort of done it, I think there's a few things that has worked really, really well for them. First of all, they've stayed store agnostic, so they go direct to consumer. through their, like, they don't sell on Steam and other places, for example, but they certainly do sell on console and mobile, and everything works everywhere. So it's one unified approach, community, and that community can share all content that they create, and everything, and the opportunity amongst all other players in the ecosystem, no matter where they come from. So that's one of the, I think, the most powerful functionality of modders, in that like, by thinking cross-platform and by thinking sort of like store agnostic, you can have this amazing situation where you can build a game that's compatible with, like, maybe players could be coming in from iOS, or they could be coming in from Steam, or they could be coming in direct through your website. The beauty of mods is that those players then get their value and they get their enjoyment once they're in your game. Like, you can retain and capture those players, because that's when they're now engaging with what content is available. So you can almost create like this in-game app store, if you will, that sort of sits across all the stores and gives you amazing and direct access to your consumers. That works really well. So they've certainly made that work really, really, really good for them. Secondly, they release so much more. They give their creators so much more access than really any other game has done to date. So their creators can define and control everything. So I like to think about Roblox as a theme park, in that it's a theme park, but the creators, but the rides are made by their players. So their creators make the rides, and their creators have complete and utter control over those rides. They have control over how people can access them, how many people can play in them, how those rides are monetized and what they cost to play, how the avatars look in them. They control all of that. And then Roblox layers in really smart little systems, like they give you access to data persistence and the ability to attach information to users and events. And so that creates like this incredible sort of like this creative playground, where it's not just about content creation. It's not just about creating a new skin or a new level, but the levels themselves actually, have control over the player's experience. And for us, like, again, at Mod.io, when we think towards the future, like, there's a lot of simple ways that you can do this to great effect. And it's certainly something that we want to enable. To maybe give a relatable example, like, imagine your, like, SnowRunner is a game that we work with. So imagine you're driving a car, a truck in SnowRunner. Like, if you gave your modders not just the ability to create trucks, but you also gave them the ability to tap into, a data stream, you could suddenly start storing, all right, this user's driven 10 kilometers in this truck, they've had 3 crashes, and you can create, so much more with that. Like, now your creators can, start doing really interesting and unique things. And your players are going to see really cool metrics. You can go like, Super Mario Maker's done, where you can see the completion rate, the failure rate of these levels, the difficulty, the average time to finish it. So giving your creators not just access to the sort of the game level customization, but actually giving them access to the data level, it's certainly something that we're working towards and thinking about, and we'd love to see, because that's where you can kind of do what Roblox has done. And I think that's a big part of what has made modding such a huge success for their game, and why their game's still quite unique, because there's really no other titles that are doing that and thinking along those lines. Just to finish here, for us, when we look at modding as a whole, and we look at the games industry and the direction that it's moving in, we feel that game developers, you have so little control over the stores, how they promote and market your game. There's a lot of sort of like, what's going to happen with streaming services, what's going to happen with subscription services, and what does that mean for you, for the audience you can reach. Everything's sort of pointing towards, you've got access to, potentially millions of subscribers on things like Games Pass, but there's uncertainty around, can you get into Games Pass, or how does that deal look like, and how do you work and retain and do more with your audience? I think the one thing that you really can control, and why I believe that thinking modding first and designing your game for user-generated content and mods is a really key and smart strategy, is it's incredibly compatible with almost any direction the industry moves in. It's like if some big new store, like Epic emerges or whatever, like, by having this agnostic approach and your content being your main value prop, it means that you can acquire players and any number of players from any channel. The more players you have, the more vibrant community you can create, the more opportunity you can do things with that community. You can work with them to, like, maybe you'll launch creator emotes, like creator season passes, like really think about how it can relate to your game strategy and what you want to do, because I think modding is one of the key and one of the strongest ways that you can compete and I guess compete with the biggest companies in the world, out innovate them, retain your users, and sort of drive all without expanding your team or really changing things. All you did was you just changed your mindset in the early days, and you focused on user-generated content and design that into your game and your thinking. It's a really, really, really powerful thing, and I believe history is certainly a great judge of that. Counter-Strike, Dota, and Fortnite and PUBG are all fantastic examples, but I also believe that they've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. And when game studios start giving their creators far more access, they start accepting that mods can work cross-platform and can work on console and mobile. They build in amazing UIs that makes it highly accessible for their entire player base. They layer in data and all these other things. They potentially even build marketplaces and stuff that can reward your creators. I believe we're going to see a new age of modding and user-generated content emerge, where game development becomes about creating an amazing game and then layering it on. So that's it for me. I appreciate everyone listening. It looks like I actually may have time for questions if there are any. But just to finish up, just to quickly wrap up here. So Skater XL, the game that I pictured here, like they've got, it's another title where just like City Skylines, where they recognize that Tony Hawk and just like SimCity, like they're massive games, like they're never going to be able to compete head on with those titles. So what is their selling? Like what is their point of differentiation? And honestly, it's their user-generated content community. It's embracing and working with that. It's about letting skateboarding is all about expressing yourself and customizing your deck, customizing your hat, customizing your outfit, playing different skate parks and different challenges. They used they gave all that access and sort of customization to their community, and they've got 100,000 people on their Discord that are producing an insane amount of content on a daily basis. And I think that's for an indie title to accomplish that, it's quite an incredible thing. And we certainly hope to see more of it. And if you ever want to talk advanced user-generated content strategy and how to do it in your game, how to how hard it is, how to implement it, how to get it working, we'd love to have a conversation with you. It's what we obsess about on a daily basis, and what we're continually thinking about the future. Like we want to help more games succeed and get more great content in their players' hands, and really reward their creators and build out these massive ecosystems and user-generated content marketplaces and the like. So thank you, Andy.
Thanks very much for that great talk, Scott. I really liked the car dash mod. That was pretty cool. And if people want to ask questions, because we're right up against the clock, where can we will you be around in the Discord later, or should people find you on Twitter?
You're welcome to find me on Twitter, and you're welcome to find me in the Discord. I'll be there all day monitoring. So any questions about mods, emails up there as well that does come through to me and our team. But yeah, welcome to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Thank you very much.